Zoo 100 What happens when two of the most 02 outspoken women in entertainment clash 0U4 on live television, with millions 0 watching as well as royal secrets are exposed. Zoo 09 and emotions reach a breaking point. The 0's love tension was so thick you could cut it 052 with a knife. And by the end, tears were soaring and audiences were left to 20 speechless. Before we dive into the Zoe 23 incredible story, make sure to hit that Zoe 25 subscribe button and let me know in the Zoe 27 comments what you think really caused Zoe 29 this explosive confrontation. The Studio 0-33 hot that Tuesday 0-35 afternoon as The View prepared for what 0-38 was supposed to be a routine Celebrity 041 interview. Whoopi Goldberg sat at her 4-4 familiar spot at the table, reviewing OR 46 her notes one final time. She had been Zoe 49 doing this for years, interviewing O's and 52 countless celebrities, politicians and 55 public figures. But something 57 different about today. The producers had 100 been unusually secretive about the 102 talking points, and there were whispers 104 around the studio that this interview 107 might get heated. Meghan Markle walked 109 onto the set with her usual composed 112 demeanor, wearing an elegant navy blue 115 dress that commanded attention without 17 being flashy. T19 she smiled and waved to the live Studio 121 audience who erupted in applause. But 1T25 those who knew how to read body language 1T27 could see the subtle signs of tension. 129 the way her shoulders were just a bit 131 too rigid. The way her smile didn't 134 quite reach her eyes. As Meghan took her 136 seat across from the panel, Whoopi 138 offered a warm greeting that seemed 140 genuine enough on the surface. The 143 cameras roll. The interview began 145 with typical softball questions about 147 Meghan's latest projects and her life in 150 California. Everything seemed perfectly 153 normal, almost boring even as they 155 discussed her podcast and various 158 charitable endeavors. But Whoopi had 200 something else on her mind. Something 2002 that had been bothering her for months. 2004, as someone who had never been afraid to 2006 speak her mind, especially about issues 2009 of authenticity and privilege. She had 2012 been watching Meghan's public narrative 214 unfold with growing skepticism. 217 the carefully crafted image, the 2020 selective storytelling, the way certain 2022 details never quite added up. It all 2026 rubbed Whoopi the wrong way. The turning 2029 point came when they started discussing 2031 Meghan's relationship with the British 2033 media and her claims about how she was 2035 treated differently than other members 2037 of the royal family. 2040 Meghan again recounting familiar talking to 42 points about the unfair coverage and the 2044 double standards she faced. She spoke 2047 with practiced precision, hitting all two fashionable beats that had worked so 2052 well in her previous interviews. 2054 Whoopi listened patiently at first, 2057 nodding along, but her expression to 59 gradually began to change. Her eyebrows 302 raised slightly and she started 304 shifting in her chair. The other 307 co-hosts seemed to sense something was 309 building, glancing nervously between 3D12 Whoopi and their guest. When Meghan 314 finished her explanation about Media 316 bias, there was a moment of silence that 3019 stretched just a beat too long. Whoopi 3D23 leaned forward slightly, her voice 3D5 taking a tone that regular viewers of 327 The View would recognize as dangerous 330 territory. Now hold on a minute. Meghan 3C33 Whoopi said, her words measured but 336 carrying an undercurrent of challenge. 3039 been in this business for a very long 3041 time, and I've seen a lot of people come 3044 and go. I've watched how the media works 3047 and I've seen how people try to control 3049 their narratives. 351 the studio audience which had been 3053 murmuring softly. 3057 even the camera operators seemed to lean 3059 and closer, sensing that something 402 significant was about to happen. Meghan's 4005 posture straightened, and her media 47 trained smile became more forced. I'm 410 not sure what getting at 4011 Whoopi. She replied, trying to maintain 4014 her composure while clearly preparing 4017 for whatever was coming next. What I'm 1420 getting at Whoopi continued. Her voice 422 gaining strength is that I think there's 425 a lot more to your story than what 4027 you've been telling people. And I think 4029 it's time to know the real 41031 questions instead of just letting you 4033 repeat the same talking points over and 4036 over again. The tension in the studio 439 became palpable. The other co-hosts Forsyth 42 exchanged worried glances knowing that Forson 44 Whoopi was about to go off script in a 4046 big way. The producers in the Control 449 room were probably having heart attacks 4 and 51 but this was live television and their 4 and 54 was no stopping what was about to 4055 unfold. Meghan tried to deflect with a 458 laugh but it came out hollow and 500 nervous. I think I've been pretty open 504 about my experiences. Whoopi. I'm not 507 sure what more you want me to say. Oh I 510 think you know exactly what I want you 5e12 to say. Whoopi shot back her legendary 5-4 directness now on full display. 517 Let's start with the real reason you and 520 Harry left England. And don't give me 523 that rehearsed speech about seeking 524 privacy and independence, because nobody 527 who actually wants privacy does a 529 Netflix deal and a book tour. The words 532 hung in the air like a challenge thrown 534 down before a duel. Meghan's carefully 538 constructed facade began to crack in 540 for the first time since she sat down. 5-year her true emotion started to show 544 through. Her jaw tightened and her 547 hands, which had been resting calmly in 5550 her lap, began to fidget with her 552 wedding ring. I think that's a pretty unfair 556 characterization of our situation. 5958 Meghan replied, her voice rising 600 slightly. We left because we weren't 604 being supported by the institution, and 606 because the media coverage was becoming 609 unbearable. We had to find a way to 611 support ourselves and our family. 6014 Whoopi wasn't buying it, and she wasn't 6016 about to let Meghan off the hook. Support 6020 yourselves. 6022 you married into one of the wealthiest 6024 families in the world. You had 6027 everything handed to you on a silver 6029 platter, and then you walked away, and 6031 spent the next few years complaining 6033 about how hard your life was. Do you 6I36 have any idea how that sounds to people 638 who are actually struggling? 6040 the accusation hit Meghan like a 6043 physical blow. Her face flushed and her successive 4-cent voice took on a defensive edge that 6 of 49 viewers had never heard before. You 6FE2 don't know what it was like. Whoopi ma. 6054 you don't know what it's like to have 6056 every single thing you do scrutinized. 6058 and criticized. You don't know what it's 7 like to feel completely alone in a 703 system that's designed to protect 705 everyone except 707 you. Oh, but I do know. Whoopi fired 7010 back. Now I know 7 and 14 exactly what it's like to be the only 716 black woman in spaces where I wasn't 718 wanted. I know what it's like to have to 721 fight for every opportunity to have 7 and 23 people question whether I belong. To 726 deal with racism and discrimination that 728 wasn't subtle or hidden behind Palace 731 walls. The difference is I didn't have 734 millions of dollars and a title to 736 cushion the blow. The comparison stung 739 and Meghan's composure finally began to 742 crack in a way that millions of viewers 744 could see. Her eyes flashed with a 746 mixture of anger and hurt. And when she 749 spoke again, her voice trembled. 51 barely contained emotion. That's not 754 fair, Whoopi. You're minimizing my 757 experience because of my circumstances. But pain is pain regardless of your bank 8U2 account. I never asked for any of this. 81005 I fell in love with someone, and suddenly 808 my entire life was turned upside down. 811 Whoopi leaned back in her chair, but her 8014 gaze never wavered from Meghan's face. 816 nobody forced you to marry him, Meghan. You knew exactly what you were getting 8021 into. You had access to advisors to 8025 people who could have prepared you for 8026 what royal life would be like. But 830 instead of adapting, instead of learning 8032 how to work within the system, you 8034 decided to burn it all down and play 8036 victim. The other coasts were frozen 839 in their seats, unsure whether to 8041 intervene or let this unprecedented 844 confrontation continue. The Studio 8046 audience was so quiet you'd hear a 8048 pin drop. Everyone sensing they were 8051 witnessing something that would be 8C53 talked about for years to come. AC55 Meghan's hands were shaking now and her 858 voice grew stronger as her anger 900 mounted. Work within the system. The 903 system that leaked stories about me to 905 the press. The system that refused to 908 protect me and my son from racist 9/11 attacks. The system that made me feel so 94 isolated and hopeless that I had 916 thoughts of ending my own life. And 999 there it is, Whoopi said, her voice 921 cutting through the tension like a 923 blade. Every time someone challenges 926 you, every time someone asks you to take 929 responsibility for your own choices, you 932 pull out the mental health card. You 935 talk about suicidal thoughts and racism. 938 like they're shields that protect you from 9340 any criticism. The accusation was so 9042 direct, so brutal that the entire studio 945 seemed to collectively hold its breath. 948 Meghan's face went pale, and for a moment 9051 she looked genuinely shocked that 953 someone would dare to challenge her on 9055 such a sensitive topic. 9I58 Meghan whispered, her voice barely 1000 audible but carrying the weight of $10.3 genuine hurt. How dare you dismiss my 1006 pain like that? I opened up about the 1009 darkest period of my life because I 1011 thought it might help other people who 1010 were struggling. I never used it as intended excuse. Whoopi's expression softened 10 slightly, but she didn't back down. 22 look, I'm not saying your pain 26 wasn't real. Mental health struggles are done in 29 serious, and I would never minimize 131 that. But what I am saying is that you 10 and 33 can't use your pain to justify every 36 decision you've made since then. Can't use it to deflect from legitimate 41 questions about your behavior. 44, what behavior? Meghan shot back, her tunty 47 voice rising. What exactly are you tuntin 50 accusing me of, Whoopi? Because I'm tuntin 52 sitting here trying to have a civil tuntin 54 conversation and you're attacking me for tuntin 56 things I never even did. I'm talking tuntin 59 about the way you've systematically 1102 destroyed relationships with people who 1104 are supposed to be your family. Whoopi 1107 replied, her voice steady but firm. I'm 1111 talking about the way you've used 1112 media to tell your side of every story. 1115 while the people you're accusing can't 1117 defend themselves because of protocol. 11 talking about the way you've turned 1122 every private family matter into 1124 public spectacle. 1126 Meghan stood up abruptly, her chair 1128 scraping against the floor. I think I've 1131 heard an un-34 it's an ambush. You invited me here 11T37 under false pretenses 1140 just so you could humiliate me on 1142 television. Sit down Meghan. Whoopi said 1145 firmly. Nobody's ambushing you. These 1148 are questions that millions of people 1150 have been asking and you agreed to come 1152 on this show. If you can't handle honest 1155 questions then maybe you shouldn't be 1157 doing interviews. The studio was 1200 electric with tension. Camera operators 12R3 were getting close-ups of both women, 1206 capturing every micro-expression, every 12:08 moment of this unprecedented 12v10 confrontation. The other co-hosts looked like they 1214 wanted to disappear into their chairs. 1217 Meghan remained standing, her whole body 1209 trembling with emotion. Honest to 1202s you're not asking questions, 2025 you're making accusations. You're 12A27 attacking my character, my marriage, my 2030 mental health. This isn't journalism. 12's actor assassination 12A36 character assassination Whoopi laughed 1239 but there was no humor in it 12Z42 Meghan. You've spent the last few years 1244 doing interviews where you've talked 1246 about how terrible your in-laws are, how 1259 racist the institution is, how badly you 1252 were treated. You've written books and 1254 done documentaries airing your family's 1257 private business, and now you want a 1300 act like your victim when someone 1302 asks you to account for your own 1303 actions. Those weren't attacks. They 1307 were my truth Meghan said, her voice 1309 cracking with emotion. I shared my 1312 experiences because I thought it was 1340 important for people to know what really 1396 Steve happened. I never set out to hurt 1319 anyone. Whoopi's voice was 1322 incredulous. Meghan there's truth. And 13926 then there's your version of events. And 1328 from your version 13 to 31 always seems to paint you as the 1333 innocent victim and everyone else as the 13 to 35 I villain. That's not truth. That's 13D38 selective stority. 40 the words hit Meghan like physical blows. 13D44 tears were starting to form in her eyes. 13E47 but she was fighting them back with 13E49 everything she had. You don't know what 1351 you're talking about. You weren't there. 13 and Fee4 they don't know what it was like to be 1355 the only person of color in that family. 13 Fee8 to feel like an outsider every single 1400 day. And you don't know what it was like 14703 for me to be the only black woman in 1405 spaces where I had to prove myself every 1408 single day without the benefit of a 14Z10 title or a prince to protect me. Whoopi 1413 kinda difference is I didn't 1415 spend my time complaining about it. I 1419 worked twice as hard. I proved myself 1421 over again and I built my own 1424 success. So because you suffered in 14E27 silence I should have too. 1430 Meghan's voice was getting higher. More 1433 desperate because you didn't speak out 1435 about the racism you faced. I'm not 14E37 allowed to speak out about mine. 1440 saying you shouldn't speak out about 1442 racism. Whoopi replied, her voice 1445 measured but intense. I'm saying you 1448 should be about what actually 1450 happened instead of turning every 1453 uncomfortable moment into a racial 1455 incident. 14 dying you should take some 14,058 responsibility for your own role in the 15-1 conflicts you've had. Meghan's composure 1504 finally shattered completely. The tears 1506 she had been holding back began to flow 1508 and her voice broke as she spoke. 1512 I can't believe this is happening. I 15 came here thinking I could have an 15 honest conversation about my 15 landing experiences 15-20 and instead I'm being attacked and 15Z22 blamed for things that weren't my fault. 15 side of Meghan crying seemed to 15Z27s and affect some of the other co-hosts who 15-29 looked like they wanted to comfort her 15-31 but Whoopi remained unmoved. 15 those tears might work with other 1536 interviewers Meghan but they don't work 1538 with me. I've been in this business too 15-43 long to be manipulated by emotions. I'm 1546 not trying to manipulate anyone. Meghan 15 Fodderford Eins instructed public 1551 image completely gone now. I'm just 1554 trying to tell my story to help people 1556 understand what I went through. Why is 1559 that's so wrong? Whoopi's expression 1602 remained stern. But something in Meghan's 1604 broken voice seemed to pierce through 1606 her armor of skepticism. Still, she 16c10 wasn't ready to let this go. 16 So it's not wrong to tell your story. 1614 Make. What's wrong is telling only the 1617 that make you look good while leaving 16s and 19 out, the parts that might make people 1621 question your version of events. Meghan 1624 wiped her eyes with the back of her 1626 hand, smearing her makeup. But the tears 16-29 kept coming. What parts am I leaving 16a31 out? What are you accusing me of hiding? 1635 I'm talking about the staff members who 1637 left because of how they were treated. 1640 Whoopi said, her voice gaining momentum. 1642 again. I'm talking about the reports of 1645 bullying, the way you allegedly spoke to 1648 people who were just trying to do their 1649 jobs. I'm talking about the way you 1652 seemed to expect special treatment while 1654 complaining about being treated 1656 differently. 1658 Those were lies, Meghan said through her 17th conviction. 1703 Those stories were planted by people who 1706 wanted to discredit me. I never bullied 1708 anyone. Yes, but I 1712 was never cruel or unreasonable. Whoopi 1715 leaned forward, her eyes boring into 17 and 18 Meghan's high standards. 1720 Meghan. There's a difference between 1722 having high standards and being 1724 impossible to work with. And from what 17-6 I've heard through the industry, 17-27 grapevine. You burned through staff 1729 faster than anyone could track. Of 1734, the accusation seemed to hit Meghan 17-36 particularly hard. She was crying openly. 1739 now. No longer trying to maintain any 1742 pretense of composure. You're getting 1744 your information from gossip and tabloid 1747 stories. You don't know the truth about 1749, what happened behind closed doors. Then 1752, tell me the truth will be challenged. 1755, stop crying and start explaining. If 1758, these stories are all lies. If you were 18 you won the perfect Duchess who was just 18. 1803 misunderstood. Then set the record 1805 straight right now. Tell me exactly what 1828 happened with your staff. Meghan looked 1810 around the studio desperately, as if 1812 searching for an escape route. The other 1815 co-watching in stunned. 1817 silence. The audience was barely 18t19 breathing, and the cameras were 18t21 capturing every moment of her breakdown. 1804 I don't have to justify myself to you or 1827 anyone else. The people who worked with 1829 me know the truth. The people who worked 1832 with either signed non-disclosure 1834 agreements or were too afraid to speak 1836 publicly. Will be shot back. That's 1839 convenient for you. Everyone 1843 who might contradict your story is 1845 legally bound to stay quiet. That's how 1849 these institutions work. Meghan said 1851 weekly. Her fight seeming to drain out 1853 of her. Everyone signs agreements. It's 1857 not specific to me, but it sure works 18t59 out well for your narrative, doesn't it? Whoopi pressed. You get to tell your 1904 side of every story while the people 1906 you're accusing can't defend themselves. You get to play victim while your 1911 alleged victims have to stay silent. 1914 Meghan buried her face in her hands, her 1917 shoulders shaking with sobs. When she 1920 looked up, her red and puffy. 1923 her makeup completely ruined. Why are 1926 you doing this to me, Whoopi? What did I 1928 ever do to you to deserve this kind of 1930 treatment? For the first time since 1933 the confrontation began. Whoopi's 1935 voice softened slightly. 1938 you didn't do anything to me personally. 1940 Meghan, but you did something to a lot of 1943 people who don't have the platform to 1945 defend themselves. You used your 1947 privilege and your media access to tell 1950 a story that made you look like a victim 1953 while painting other people as villains. 1959 you won a villain. Meghan protested 2001 weekly. You didn't have to. Whoopi 24 replied. You told your story in a way 27 that made it clear who the bad guys were 2009 supposed to be. You talked about unnamed 2012 family members making racist comments. 2050 you talked about being denied help when 2018 you were struggling. You painted a 2020 picture of an institution that was cruel 2022 and unsympathetic. And you made sure 2025 everyone knew you were the innocent 2027 victim in all of it. Meghan's voice was 2030 barely a whisper now. But that's what 2032 happened. That's my truth. 35 your truth, Whoopi repeated, shaking her 2038 head. Meghan, the truth isn't subjective. 24-2 either these things happened the way you 24-4 said they did or they didn't. Either you 24-7 were the perfect Duchess who was 2048 mistreated by evil in-laws, or you were 2052 a difficult person who couldn't adapt to 2054 a challenging situation. The studio fell completely silent 2001, except for the sound of Meghan's quiet 2103 crying. Even the camera operators seemed 2106 to be holding their breath, afraid to make any noise that might break the 2111 intensity of the moment. I never said I 2014 was perfect. Meghan finally managed to 2160 say through her tears. I made mistakes 2019 I was learning. But that doesn't mean I 2022 deserve to be treated the way I was 2004 treated. And maybe you didn't deserve 2026 all of it. Whoopi conceded, her voice 2030 gentler now but still firm. But you 2133 also didn't deserve to have your every 21s and 35 wish granted without question. You 21s at 37 are a family with traditions 21-40 going back centuries, and instead of 2022 trying to understand and respect those 21s and 44 traditions, you seem to expect them to 2046 change everything to accommodate you. 2149 Meghan looked up at Whoopi with eyes full 21s and 51 of pain and confusion. Is it so wrong to 2155 want to be treated with basic human 2157 dignity? Is it so wrong to want your 22-100 family to protect you from attacks? It's not wrong to want those things, 22-5 Whoopi said. But it's also not wrong for 22-08 a family to expect you to understand 20-10 their constraints and limitations. The royal family can't just issue 22-15 statements defending every family member 22-17 from every criticism. That's not how 2019 they operate. And you knew that going 22-22 in. But I didn't know it would be like 22s in 25 this Meghan Sir said, her voice small and 2028 broken. I didn't know how hard it would 22-30 be, how isolated I would feel. How much 22 and 34 I would lose amounts of 27-36 Whoopi's expression softened further and 22-39 for a moment. The combative inner 41 was replaced by someone who genuinely 22-44 understood struggle and hardship. I 2047 believe that you didn't know how hard it 2049 would be. And I believe that you 20-51 struggled with the transition. But what 22-54 I don't understand is why you couldn't 21-56 find a way to work through those 20-57 challenges without burning down 22-59 everything and everyone around you. The 23-30 question hung in the air, and Meghan 23-30 seemed to consider it seriously for the 23-8 first time. Her crying had slowed, but 23-11 the tears were still flowing. Maybe I 23-34 could have handled things differently. 23-16 maybe I could have been more patient. 23-18 more understanding, but I was drowning. 23-20 Whoopi. I felt like I was losing myself. 23-24 and I didn't know how to ask for help. 23-27 without seeming weak. So you decided to 20-30 leave and take your story public. Whoopi 23-33 said not unkindly. I decided to tell my 23-36 truth so that people would understand. 23-38 Meghan corrected. But even she seemed to 20-30-42 hear how that sounded now. Whoopi sat 20-34 her intense gaze 23-47 never leaving Meghan's face. And in 23-50 telling your truth, you made sure that 23-52 your version of events would be the only 23-54 one most people ever heard. You made sure that you would be seen as the 20-30-59 victim and they would be seen as the 24-01 oppressors. Meghan didn't respond 24-3 immediately. She sat there, tears still her 7 streaming down her face, looking smaller 24-10 and more vulnerable than anyone ever 24-12 seen her in public. 24-2 the confident Midyasavi Duchess was 24-6 seeds gone, replaced by someone who looked 24-19 genuinely broken and confused. I don't 24-23 know what you want me to say Whoopi? 24-26 she finally whispered. I can't take 24-28 back what I've said. I can't undo the 24-31 interviews or the documentaries. I told 24-34 my story because I felt like I had to 24-37 and maybe that was selfish, all I knew how to do. Whoopi nodded 24-43 slowly as if finally hearing something 24-46 genuine from Meghan for the first time in 24-48 the entire interview. That might be the 24-51 most honest thing you've said since you 24-53 sat down. And you know what, I can 24-56 respect that even if I don't agree with 24-58 your choices. The confrontation seemed 25-lead the energy in the 25-4 room shifting from combative to 25-06 something more complex and nuanced. 25-09 Meghan was still crying. 25-12 and Whoopi was watching her with an 25-42 expression that mixed criticism with 25-6 something that might have been 25-sensitive understanding. This has been one of the 25-20 most difficult conversations I've ever 25-22 had on television, Whoopi said finally 25-25 addressing both Meghan and the audience. But sometimes the most important 25-30 conversations are the hardest ones to 25-32 have. Meghan not unable to speak, her 25-36 emotional reserves completely exhausted. The woman who had walked onto the set 25-41 with such poise and confidence was gone 25-45 replaced by someone raw and human and 25-47, completely stripped of pretense. As the show prepared to go to commercial 25-52 poo break viewers were left with an image 25 that would be replayed and analyzed for 25-57 months to come. Meghan Markle crying 2600 openly on live television while Whoopi 2602 Goldberg sat across from her having 26-05 delivered one of the most brutal but 26-07 perhaps necessary interviews in 26-10 television history. What did you think 2060 of this explosive confrontation? 2060-15 do you believe Whoopi was right to 26-17 challenge Meghan so directly or did she 2069 go too far? Drop your thoughts in the 2060 comments below and make sure to 2624 subscribe for more incredible